if you're not creating space for yourself by training those under you to take your job, then you cannot move on to have something bigger and better. So you will never achieve your life goals if you're afraid of giving your skills to those that you work with.
How is it going, ladies and gentlemen? This is Sean Barnes. I want to welcome you back to The Way of the Wolf. Our guest today is a lady named Karen Vilas. She is the president of Fortress Protective Buildings. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to go out and watch them blow stuff up and light things on fire. I got some footage that we're going to layer into the show today, so definitely pay attention throughout because you're going to see some cool explosions and stuff. Karen, welcome to The Way of the Wolf.
Thank you, Sean, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Okay, maybe a little bit nervous, but that's okay. We're going to work through this.
It always happens.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about what is Fortress?
Okay. So Fortress is a wholly owned subsidiary of the parent company, Baker Engineering and Risk Consultants. Baker Risk has been around for 40 plus years. Started as a family owned company. Now we're a 100% employee owned company. And the entire purpose of that business is to help our clients identify, evaluate, and solve and manage catastrophic risks. So anything that can blow up, catch on fire, toxic releases, those big things that happen in an industrial setting that get on the news, that's what Baker Risk does. I have been with Baker Risk for almost 17 years now. So my background has been visiting facilities all over the world, identifying the things that can go wrong. And if that stuff does go wrong, who does it impact? Does it hurt people, injure people, kill people, inside, outside? And with that, we identified a major hole in the market, and that is a building that will protect not just against blast hazards or just against fire hazards, but protect against anything that can happen in an industrial setting. And so after about 3 years of internal research and development and funding, we spun off Fortress Protective Buildings for that exact purpose. So to answer your question in one sentence, Fortress protects life.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So talk me through the process of starting a company within another company. And then I also want to know a little bit more about it being employee owned. So we'll get to that in a moment, but I definitely want to know your experience because you were the lucky one that got chosen to start up this thing. And obviously you got a team, but kind of talk me through that process.
So there's pluses and minuses. The good thing about starting up in an established business is you've got a little bit of funding and money there. So you're not starting up with no money or having to go out and pitch and get some venture capital money. You're able to have a little bit of leeway and run up to get your product going and in the market. So that's a huge positive. The negative side of things is when you come out of a company that's used to selling a billable hour as a consultancy, you're now starting to sell a product. And so all systems are set up improperly for selling a product. So you're starting from the ground up and how you rebuild your sales systems, your financial systems, your accounting systems, the way you account for money across companies, because we do use Baker Risk for design and engineering and support. So the hurdles of just having a different business model is really cumbersome.
Okay. So did it require significant changes to your existing application systems, obviously processes, or did you go out and find another financial system? Or what was that like?
So we have made our existing systems work to date. We are now evaluating, for example, a new financial system that the entire company is going to move in as we move into 2025. So we're tackling those one at a time. And again, being part of a bigger organization, you have the benefits of being in a bigger organization, but things do happen a little bit slower than you'd want to.
How many employees do you guys have?
Fortress is about 5. Baker Risk is about 200.
Oh, okay. All right. Wow. All right. So the testing facility that I had the opportunity to go to, is that a Baker Risk facility or Fortress or both?
That is a Baker Risk facility. Okay. That's actually, we have 3 test facilities. We have one that is a lab that looks at metallurgical issues, so like material failures, and support a lot of incident investigations. That's located in our San Antonio office. You went to the Skull Crossing one, which is in Livernia, about 30 miles east of San Antonio. And then our large one, which hopefully you'll get a chance to visit at some time, is Box Canyon, which is out in West Texas. And so that's the one that's a 2,000-acre ranch where we do a lot of our huge explosions.
What?
Yes.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. So next time I travel to Midland to visit customers or just go out there because it's such a great place to visit, I will have to give you a call and say, hey, how do I get out to see some big booms?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. All right. So you've been with Baker Risk for, I think, 17 years?
Correct.
You said?
Yeah.
Okay. You are president of Fortress now. Talk to me a little bit about women in leadership.
Oh, women in leadership. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to caveat this by saying that I am a woman and I am in leadership. But the term women in leadership, I think, has somewhat gained this association with the DEI movement, right? So it's a inclusionary thing that sometimes, and this is going to be probably put people off the wrong way, is I think sometimes can impact women both positively and negatively. So for me, what it means to be a woman in leadership is that I do the same things that males in leadership do. I might just do them a little bit differently. And so that's kind of my background stance. I'm happy to answer additional questions about that.
Yes, please. We're going to dig into this. So this should be interesting. All right. So talk me through what you mean. What do you mean when you say you're going to do a lot of things similarly, but you're going to do it differently than maybe male counterparts would do? What exactly do you mean by that?
So, okay, so I guess do you mind if I step back a little bit in my life a little bit? Okay, so I'm unique in that I grew up in West Virginia on a farm, and kind of isolated and rural. My brother was my best friend. So I grew up with a lot of exposure to male mindset, male ways of solving problems. And so I've embodied a lot of that as I've gotten older through leadership and sports. And then I've brought that to the business world. As I've transitioned up through Baker Risk, it's been an interesting situation, and I've been somewhat privileged because Baker Risk is an extremely merit-based company. It's, they're not doing a lot of things completely focused on DEI because they don't have to. It's, are you doing your job? Are you good at your job? And will you be good at the role that we want you to do? So I've not been in that background of going up through here's a guided process to be a woman in leadership. All of mine has been kind of naturally developed. And in saying that, I would like to say that I do want to mentor future females in our organization because we've added a lot of female diversity over the years just because, as you grow, obviously your diversity grows. So to answer your questions, how do I do things differently? I think I tend to be a little bit more empathetic, and I focus a little bit more on the relationship side. I try to pull a little bit of the personality dynamics into discussions about business, about career, about future progression, where my team wants to go and who we want to be. And I think that might be a little bit different than what is traditionally done from a leadership perspective.
That's fair. And, this is a very, we'll say, hot topic in recent years, whenever we lean into the conversation of DEI, what that means. And, whenever I had the opportunity to kind of start an ESG function a couple of years ago, and I started learning more about these various ESG-related frameworks, and one of the things that stood out that is challenging but probably to be expected because ESG is relatively in its infancy, is many of these frameworks are based on equality of outcome instead of equality of opportunity. That creates challenges because we're starting to see a situation where the whole ESG, DEI movement was really aimed to eliminate discrimination, but it's almost like the pendulum has swung too far into just simply a different type of discrimination. So very challenging space to navigate through, but people like you that are able to go in and kind of be trailblazers and showcase, look, it's not like this has to be this whole one versus the other. You touched on leading with empathy. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. That is what's most important.
Right. And so to build off that a little bit is I truly believe that the strongest teams are those that bring diversity of thought. And you can't have diversity of thought unless you have diversity across your leadership team level, but also your teams, whether that's male, female, racially, age, background, rich, poor. It doesn't matter. Everybody is going to bring a different set of experiences, and you're going to grow and be a better company because of that. I believe that that was the original intent of this better business model of inclusivity. And I think we've moved so far beyond that it's almost degraded the original intent. And being in a woman in leadership, I'm going to put that in quotes a little bit here, but one of the things that I've encountered is hearing people say, oh, this person is in a leadership position just because they needed a female leader or they needed a person of color. And to me, that degrades everything that I have worked for and built for myself. And so anytime that we are just trying to do equality for equality's sake, it is really doing a disservice for those who have worked their way up to earn it and deserve it.
Yeah. You know, one thing I've found that is extremely helpful and beneficial is when a female is growing in her career, stepping into more and more leadership roles in oil and gas, in certain manufacturing, in certain industries that are like old school, roughneck, male dominated. It can be intimidating. However, if someone like yourself or another female, I mean, I've got a number of females on my team that you've met and have spoken to, when they're able to walk into a room with a commanding presence and have a command of knowledge in a given domain, a lot of that stuff kind of goes to the wayside. You walk into a room and you start talking about, which I've got some footage of you talking about some of the Fortress buildings. It's very clear that you know what you're talking about, and it makes it much easier for people to say, oh, okay, well, she's not there just because she's a woman. She's there because she actually knows what she's doing. She knows what she's talking about.
Right. And it does take some of that showing that you are a leader and an expert in your field, and coming out of the Baker Risk environment where they are world renowned for being the leaders in what they do. That was exceptionally hard. I'll step back and tell a story here for a minute. I was probably in my mid-20s, and at that period of time, I was doing a lot of consulting work in the Middle East. And we had gone and we were in one country, and we had to present to that country's petroleum company's board on the findings of one of our safety studies. And so it's one of those situations where you go in and you have 10 minutes and you get up and speak. And I was with my boss, who's old, gray hair guy. Sorry, Bill. Old gray hair guy. And when it comes our turn to speak, it was me that got up and spoke. And you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And I was extremely nervous, more nervous than today. But in that 10 minutes, I was able to build my knowledge, show them my knowledge, and then build off of that initial foundation to show them what their issues were and talk about it so intelligently in a way that they knew I knew their assets. And it turned into a great discussion, and I got way more than that originally allotted 10 minutes. And to me now, even today, that's one of the biggest wins of my career, because that was such a challenging environment to walk into.
Yeah, talk about extremes.
Yeah.
For sure.
25-ish. That was pretty intimidating.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay. All right. So don't want to spend the entire time on DEI stuff.
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit about MBAs. So, okay, I need to backtrack a little bit because, over the years, you and I have kind of just chatted randomly just throughout the years.
Yep.
And I have to commend you on leaving little comments that are like cliffhanger in nature. And I think, like women in leadership, you're like, oh, I have my thoughts on that. And then that was it. I'm like, okay. So, we're going to scratch a little bit deeper on that. And then I think you said something similar around MBAs. I have my own thoughts on MBAs, but talk me through yours before I get into mine.
So I have a feeling the MBA conversation is one that you and I could have for hours. So I will try to keep it brief here. So I did take a leave of absence from work, and I went and did an MBA program at University of Oxford. And I specifically chose that program because it was an expedited program where I ended up taking roughly 18 months leave of absence from work. I think MBAs done for the right reason are great. So if you want to go and you want to increase your network, but also increase diversity of thought in what you're exposed to, that is why you do an MBA. If you want to go just to get MBA to say you have an MBA, that's not the reason to do it. Do I think it's necessary to get an MBA to have the skills to run a business? Absolutely not. I think you're a great example of somebody who is dedicated enough to go out and search and gain that information on their own and build the network on your own. For me, I knew that I wouldn't be able to do that. So I couldn't even do it part-time. So for me, it was, I'm going to take this considerable amount of time and I'm going to go back into a situation where I'm focused on learning these concepts, where I'm exposed to, it was 92 different countries in my program, exposed to differences in thought. And so for me, at that period in time in my career and my career growth, it was perfect.
How long ago was this?
I started in 2017, finished in 2018.
Okay. All right. So roughly how old were you whenever you decided to do this?
23-ish, 22-ish.
Okay. All right. All
or
right.
33. Sorry, 32, 33.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I was in my 30s. I've been doing the same type of work at Baker Risk, which I absolutely love. Again, the why of protecting life is massive. But we were a homogeneous company. I stumbled on that word a little bit, but people look the same backgrounds. We're a company in Texas. I wanted to go out and get different thoughts as I moved up through my career in terms of business and leadership, and it did that for me. Yeah.
So I think one thing we could definitely agree on is it is not a prerequisite for success to have an MBA. And I love this quote by Elon Musk where he basically says MBAs are great at building presentations, but they don't know how to run a business. Now, I think if we peel that back a little bit, there is a trend in which somebody, they go to college, they get their bachelor's degree, they move on, they get their master's, the MBA, or whatever advanced degrees that they get, and then they're dropped in to the workforce. So that is something that I think happens, we'll say quite frequently, and they think that they're going to get a golden parachute down into an organization with the VP title just because they have an MBA, which happens quite a bit, I would say. Unfortunately, they're dropped into that executive level role and they don't know anything about running a business. Because they don't, whenever they're going through the program, I suspect they don't have an actual frame of reference to pull upon. It's like reading all of this text in a book. Okay, I can memorize it and take the test, and I'm sure there's workshops and stuff. But until you actually run a business, you're part of a team, you have to grow and learn how to lead people. Through that process, you actually gain experiences. And so I do think there is value if you're so inclined, say you're 10 years into your career, then going and getting an MBA, somewhat like what you did, because you've got a decade of experience to pull upon so that the knowledge that you are gaining is really cemented. You're like, you know what? I ran into that 2 years ago and this would have solved that problem for me.
And taking that, again, one step further, that is 100% true. Having the experience and being a part of a business where, I'd moved up enough that I'd seen the issues within the business, some of the challenges that were being faced. But the program I chose was like that across the board. It was all people that had about that 10 years level of experience in all different backgrounds. And so the way they set up that curriculum is, yes, we have a professor and we have a teacher, but this is geared on you guys sharing your stories and your experiences, and you're going to learn from each other as much as you learn from us. And that is very, very different than going straight from undergrad into an MBA where you focus on finance because you're going to go and be an investment banker, and that's your entire thought process as you move through the MBA. That is not a program that I would have chosen, nor did I choose that. So it's getting out of it what you want to get out of it, and you have to be very intentional in picking a program when you do that.
That's a really good point. One of my mentors, he worked his way up through the ranks in various businesses, and now he started his own consulting company over a decade ago. He actually sits in interim CEO roles at numerous organizations, sits on many boards, and I've asked him, does he ever have any aspirations to get an MBA? He said, quite frankly, I wouldn't learn anything because I've been running businesses for 15 years. I understand a P&L, I understand M&A, I understand, securing fund, like all of these things. So there's not really a lot of value in it for someone like that. And I think it all just comes down to your own career path and trajectory and what makes the most sense for you. I've had people that I've coached in the past that have felt like they had stalled out in their career. And in our conversation, it's like, well, I'm going to go get my MBA. I'm like, okay, well, that's not a guarantee that it's going to get you this promotion. You can do it if you want to learn those things, but don't go into it thinking I'm going to spend $100,000 or whatever the number is to get an MBA and think that magically you're going to get promoted to a VP level role. Right? We're all on different journeys, but that is not a silver bullet that's going to get you there.
Right. And that should never be a decision for doing an MBA. And I've had conversations with my friends, and I've said, no, your reasons for wanting to get an MBA is not why you want to get an MBA. Don't do that. If that's what you want, just take 1 or 2 classes or read a couple of books on that topic. You don't need to go get an MBA. The guy that you talked about who's run businesses, the other part of that the MBA does bring you is the network. He's built his network, so he's not gaining anything from that perspective as well. For me, building that network was huge. I worked in one organization, one company, one thought process, and I had mentors within that organization, several great mentors. But again, it wasn't anybody that looked like me or thought like me or was a little bit on the younger side. And going out and being exposed to business-minded leaders in a setting where I could learn from them and gain from them was huge. So that was the driver for me and probably why I chose to do it.
In your experiences, obviously, I have no doubt you've worked with numerous other MBAs. Mm-hmm. Have you ever encountered somebody that had an MBA and their ego was so massive that they couldn't fit their head through the door? All they ever did was brag about their MBA, but could not get anything accomplished. Have you ever encountered that?
I have, not within my organization, because again, we're very merit based. So our MBA is like, recently we ordered new business cards because we got a new logo within Baker Risk. It's like, you need to put your MBA on your business cards. It's like, no. Why? Right? So that's the mentality of our background within my organization. But when you go out into the business world, and for me now as a president of company, meeting people in other organizations at that level, it does become completely obvious what you're saying. And I can see why you have an aversion to MBA as a principle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if aversion is the right term, but my alarms kind of go off. Maybe it is the right term. Maybe.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, I have encountered some people like yourself that are impressive that have MBAs, right? So we can't just say, oh, if you've got an MBA, you're going to be an arrogant prick, right? That's not fair, right? We can't just bucketize everybody like that, because I do think that there are people that go out there for the right reasons. Yep. They don't brag about it. They don't throw it in people's face. They did it for a given reason. You were very intentional about the program that you chose, why you chose that program, and so on. So I think there's a lot of value in that. One other thing, I've had a colleague of mine that a couple years back ended up going through an MBA program. I won't say the school, but he ended up going through an MBA program, and as he was going through it, there were a number of times when he came to me asking for like guidance and thought, well, what is it? I don't understand this. And I would talk him through it. Now, he, we'll say he struggled a bit to get through the program and actually failed a lot of the content courses or whatever. And there were a few points when I asked him, well, are you just going to have to retake it or whatnot? And he said, well, and talk with my professor. Basically, he's going to go ahead and pass me because I was trying really hard. I have an issue with that, right? And I get you're paying a lot of money to an institution to get this degree, but oh, man, like I really struggled with that.
So I don't know what program that is, but that does a disservice to, again, everybody who tried hard and really pushed themselves through it. I have a problem with the everybody gets a trophy mentality anyways. To expand that to everybody gets a degree is just really puts my back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. All right. So enough. All right. So enough of the ESG, DEI, MBA conversations. All right. So let me see if I can pull up a video of some explosions. Let me see here.
First of all, what did you think of that day? I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it.
Oh, man. Okay, so I wasn't sure what to expect. Obviously, I showed up with my GoPro, and it's like, okay, all right, what is this about? I just knew I was going to see fire, and that got me excited. Yeah. Right? and we went through the class. The class was I actually really enjoyed it because it was very educational, and I think I probably raised my hand and asked more questions than anybody else that day.
Sean asked the most questions and the best questions afterwards. Everybody was like, man, those were some really good questions. So lasting impressions.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I really enjoyed the classroom part. I was really thinking, oh man, this is going to suck. I want to see some stuff blow up, right? Yeah. But I did learn a good amount whenever you had the presentations and stuff like that. So that was great. Seeing the different facilities blow up, which we'll show here in just a moment, I found that fascinating to see the effect that occurs when you have, we'll say, a cluttered environment versus an open space in terms of I don't know if I'm going to butcher this, but the rate of acceleration or expansion of the explosion. I would have thought if you've got a whole bunch of stuff in the way that it would have slowed it down, but actually the inverse was true, which was really cool to see in slow motion, right? For sure. So let me see if I can pull up a video of that, and then for those of you that are listening, feel free to go to the YouTube channel. It's absolutely free, and you can watch these explosions.
It's totally worth it.
It definitely is. If I can, let's see here. I probably should have had this queued up. Okay, so this is just a picture that I took whenever the flame was going around. That's like meme worthy right there. I think there's a meme of a little girl with a house burning down.
There is.
So I was trying to emulate that. Yeah, so I did a good job there.
Yeah, it was good.
Is this? No, not this one. I probably should have had this. It was towards the end of the day that those explosions were occurring, right? Okay, so talk me through, as I try to find this video, can you talk us through what we're going to look at? And first, we'll show the two different buildings.
The two rigs.
Yep.
Okay. So again, to put into context, Baker Risk looks at catastrophic events. When we're talking industrial settings, those tend to be blasts, which get a lot of the news because they're big and impressive, and everybody likes a good explosion on the news. And so that's what we call an explosion. Then there's the fire, which is when something burns but doesn't necessarily come with a massive amount of energy. A lot of times the news gets it wrong and calls a fire an explosion. So I will just set the stage with that. And then there's things that you can't really see as much, and that's getting exposed to toxic gases. We obviously didn't expose Sean to toxic gases. So
Thank you.
he didn't get to see that piece. And then there's the natural disaster side of it as well. What Sean's pulling up now is actually we have 2 rigs set up side by side. One has what we call stuff. It's kind of, it's meant to simulate pipes in an industrial setting. It's PVC pipes. In an industrial setting, you have things like pipes that your materials run through. You have heat exchangers, materials, vessels. All of that gets in the way of a gas cloud. So you have an unintentional release of gas. It gets in the quote-unquote stuff. And as it gets in the stuff, it mixes with air. And the turbulence and mixing with air makes it much more flammable, much more energetic. And that's why you get the larger explosions off of that. If you go into a completely open space where there's no other stuff there and it lights on fire, it's just going to burn. And so you're not going to get that explosive energy. So the more stuff, the more confined, the more congested it all is. Confined is like this desk and the floor, that's 2D confinement. All of that stuff is going to make your explosion worse.
Yeah, so for all of you hoarders,
yes.
Let's just hope your house never explodes because it's going to be very violent. Okay.
And we do a lot of house explosions, so that's a real
really?
thing. Yeah.
Okay, is that out in West Texas?
Well, no, natural gas explosions, they're all over the country. So anywhere that uses gas as a heating mechanism, something goes wrong. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me see if I got the volume up here. And I'll zoom in on this on the...
Okay.
7, 6,
It's going to be this one.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Okay, so that's not impressive.
It wasn't. So whenever I saw that, I thought, okay, well, let's see what happens to the next one.
Yes, so that's what we would call a flash fire. There's no stuff there. It just ignites and burns. So.
Copy that. We'll go ahead and do the VCE rig. So firing in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we need to get you out to West Texas where it's a lot bigger than that.
So we were obviously, what is it, about 80 yards away-ish, something like that. But we still felt the shock wave from it. And actually, I think, I'll try to zoom in on the video footage, but I think I was actually able to catch the shock wave, which is also really freaking cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so talk me through, well, you kind of did a little bit, right? A big open space, and then that flash fire. At what point does the terminology shift from flash fire to explosion?
Okay, so there's many different types of explosions. So if you're talking about bombs, TNT, things like that, those are what are known as high explosives. That's not what you saw. What we tend to test is more of the vapor cloud explosions that you see off of hydrocarbons. So again, the industrial setting. Hydrocarbons can have 2 different types of explosions. There's the deflagration and then detonation. That, what you saw, is a deflagration, which basically means it's burning as fast as the gas will burn, but it never hits that Mach 1 and goes supersonic. Detonation happens when that transition occurs, and then it burns all the gas at once. So it gives a much larger, much bigger explosions. We aren't allowed to do those here anymore because we started setting off the Richter scale in San Antonio.
Oh, how long ago did that happen?
10, 15 years ago, which is why we bought the ranch in West Texas. So we use that to do our much bigger things. The terminology changes when you get enough mixture in air that you get a burning energy. It's burning fast enough to create an energetic event. So a flash fire, you're going to feel heat. You're not going to feel a pressure wave. The explosion, you feel a pressure wave. So it's pushing air. The explosion's pushing air in front of it because it's burning fast enough to create a front. So if you think about it in a sound wave, it's the same as a sound wave.
Okay, so I might not have actually captured that on the second one on my footage. Maybe was that covered? I think there's a video that you guys showed in the course where you could actually see the pressure wave.
Correct. And if you look at the Fortress Defender test videos, you can see the ripple of the pressure wave, both from the VCE, from the deflagration load generator test, and then the high explosion when we did. You can see that one as well. So that side by side is a really good comparison of what that looks like.
Okay. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun to watch. And then, so talk me through these images of, it's basically a flamethrower that you guys have set up. And we actually set up some marshmallows and we were taking bets on how, at what point they would be safe to eat, though I question if any of them were really safe to eat. But
I was questioning why people were eating lots of those.
I did not eat any. I think I took pictures and documented how charred they were at different distances. But yeah, so talk me through what is the purpose and how do you guys use this?
Okay. So that's what we call our jet fire rig. It's our process safety test rig. We can use it to do pool fires, which is basically you spill material on the ground and light it on fire. What you're seeing here in this video is a jet fire. So basically it's a pressurized release that then ignites, and it's putting out a large amount of thermal energy. I think you saw the propane. So this is propane. The one that has the black cloud is obviously the gasoline, which behaves differently. So the gasoline, and if you show one of these, you'll see that there's the burning going out, but then it also rains out. So you get the liquid part that comes off of it. So it's showing some of that phenomenon. We use this test rig for multiple purposes. So on the end of that, we can rotate the type of connections, so we can show industrial clients what a flange leak looks like, what it looks like when a pressure relief valve pops, because they do all these hazard studies where they try to quantify, if X event happens, what does it look like, who's impacted, and what do we need to be concerned about it. They don't necessarily know what that feels like or looks like in real life unless they've worked for many, many years. And so this gives them a way to come in and say, oh, that's what it looks like when there's a flange leak. That's not so bad because there's only one bolt missing. But then if you have the complete loss of the flange, it gets really, really bad. So it's used to put events into context.
Okay. All right. And let's see here. I think I might have had a video of that. Okay, yeah, let's see here.
Yeah.
So that's the propane?
That's the propane. And so it's basically if you're somebody who's seen a propane tank that's used for heating at a house, it's basically coming off of one of those, saturated, and then being lit on fire.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to completely ninja topic change. Are you familiar with, so Apple, their health app has like a log, like how are you feeling today, stuff like that. So that was me in the moment it popped up. Very pleasant. It was a lot of fun. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and tag a little marker here. And then the last video or thing that I want to cover, it's actually a clip of you talking through Fortress, one of the buildings, and you could see kind of some of the cracking that was occurring on the back side or on the inside of it. While I find that video, can you kind of talk through?
So I'm guessing here at what you're about to show, but Fortress, I mentioned earlier that Baker has spent about 3 years funding the testing and development of the Fortress building product. And what you're seeing here in this video is what we call our boneyard. It's our it's all of our test specimens that we tested. So where Jay is pointing now is he's highlighting that we didn't just test these building components once, we tested them over and over and over again. So that wall component was tested 5 times, and it was tested well beyond what it's designed for and rated for. And the whole idea is we don't want just our buildings to protect in the actual event, but we want them to be fully functional after the event. And there is a very specific reason for that. And it's most of the time when people are investing in these protective buildings, it's because they need people to stay there and bring the unit to a safe state. And if you've damaged equipment inside, they can't do that. So these buildings, it's as important for them to be resilient as it is for them to save life.
Okay. All right. So that makes sense. Now, one other thing that we tested, I don't have the footage here, but there was you know what, I do have a picture of it somewhere. You had a whole bunch of stuff up on the walls. Mm-hmm. And there was, I want to say, an explosion of some sort, but it almost looked like a cannon type device. And then on the back side of it, you had a wall with like pictures and books and stuff like that. Let me see if I can find. I don't think I have any footage of that right off the top of my head. But okay, so that's one of the pictures that I took of it.
Yeah, so this is what we call our shock tube, and what this is intended to do is this is a patented design, and we use this a lot for the government, military, defense, but then also understanding building components. We can put different fixtures on the end there and basically get it all the way up to 2-story components, so 20 feet. We charge what looks like the big long tube full of a different type of compressed gas, and we, depending on the material and the pressure that we bring it up to, we can control the load that's put on the specimen at the end. So what we're trying to control is what is the pressure or load that's delivered and how long does that load apply. What you're looking at in terms of these tests are extremely important because there's basically 2 things when a building is impacted with an explosion. There's the initial damage to the building, like if you lose a wall component and it flies, or you lose the roof and it's heavy and it collapses. That obviously causes severe injury and potentially death to people inside. The other aspect that is less well known until we started doing these tests is what's known as the non-structural debris hazard issues. And that's, we know walls flex. So for example, a metal building wall is designed to flex without failing, depending on the level that it's allowed to sustain, but somewhere between 4 and 6 inches. So when you bend at a super high velocity, 4 to 6 inches, what happens to anything that's against that wall?
Projectile.
100%. And so if you look at, I'm going to throw out some recommended practices here. So API 752, 753, so permanent buildings and temporary buildings. In the past, they've just said, you've got to design your buildings to protect. It mentions buildings. You can design a building to be 100% intact after an explosion, but it doesn't account for this. In January, they re-released that, and it says, actually, you have to account for this happening on the inside, too. So,
January of this year?
Mm-hmm, brand new. And a lot of it's coming off of these types of tests.
Okay.
So you got to see cutting edge.
Very cutting edge. So this was, I'll see if I have some video footage of this test. I think I might have got some, and I'll splice that in as well. But it was pretty interesting to see on one panel. I think you guys had stuff that was mounted to the wall, and the other panel you had things that were just a little bit off of the wall.
Well, so no, there's and I believe what we were doing here, and this, because this is what we've been doing in this testing program, is there's a recommendation for how you should mount and anchor things in an industrial setting. So we were testing that versus additional upgrades. So if you do the bare minimum, what does that look like? Or if you use a better mounting system, what does that look like? And
so the better mounting system's over here on the left.
Yes.
Yes. Got it. Check. Okay.
Right. So I will, because I am Fortress, I will step in here and say that these types of tests directly fed our Fortress design, and we know that if we hit our maximum design load, we are designed to flex up to 1.5 inches. Because of that, we do all of our interior fit out and design 2 inches off the wall. So we will never transfer that load from the exterior of the building to the interior of the building, and you will never see that in one of our products. So an example of engineering, design, testing coming full circle.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So, okay, so here's the thing. I would imagine you guys don't really have many or any issues in attracting talent, being able to do fun stuff like that.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, because talent acquisition and retention is a hot topic for a lot of companies these days. But I would imagine that's not as much of a challenge for you guys.
Yeah, so we have a very unique skill set, and it is an important skill set to operating companies. And we're a small consultancy. We transitioned to be employee owned. We cannot offer the salaries and the ranges that operating companies can, right? But we offer something else, and it's not just that fun, it's a true why. And if you look at any of these Gallup surveys, and we do those like most people do these days, we test off the charts and why, and that's because all of us know that what we do every single day has the potential to save lives in the future.
You know, one thing that definitely resonated as I was meeting Jay and the rest of the group there, like, you could tell that they were in it to win it. Like, they were all about this stuff. They cared obviously about all of our safety. They spent the time to talk through the tests. You could tell that they loved what they were doing.
Right.
And man, that is such a crucial aspect to any business, that everyone on board understands what is the mission, what is the purpose, is it something I can get behind? Right. Do I have the ability to contribute in a meaningful way to this mission and objective? And when you have your employee population with that mindset and they're bought in, it builds an extremely strong culture that's like borderline unbreakable. Mm-hmm. The strategy doesn't even matter as much when you have a culture that strong. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter at all, but I think culture wins over strategy.
I would say that's 100% true. You know, you're talking about talent acquisition. The other side of that is retention. You know, I was there 17 years. You met Jay. He's been there 16, 17 years. Brad, he's been there 12 plus, I want to say. You know, the longevity in our organization allows us to be very, very strong, both in our technical knowledge, but also in our belief of what we're doing. The flip side of that is we do need to bring in people, though, for that different mindset. And that's part of the strategy, is making sure we stay dynamic, and there's different types of risks coming on, different types of energy mixes coming in. We need to change a little bit to account for those, but otherwise the staying power is there.
Well, and I think this is an inevitable challenge for all organizations that are growing, which I think most entrepreneurs and business leaders, they want to grow the business for whatever their driver, whatever their reason for wanting to grow the business, but they want to grow the business. Just because you want to grow the business, that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to grow the business, or you know how to attract the right talent. And one thing that I've come to recognize is when you have a strong culture in your organization, when you have people that are on the team that love what they do, and yeah, every now and then work is going to suck, right? That is just the reality that we're faced with. But if you can get behind a mission, you love what you do, you appreciate the people that you work with, you respect them, that in and of itself solves so many challenges around attracting and retaining talent, because the employees become an advocate for the organization. They're reaching out to their friends. Hey, we've got a position open. Come on over. Right. Or family, or you know, it doesn't matter who it is, but the employees, they're going to help recruit for your organization because they love what they do. And it's not just contingent upon these recruiters going out and scouring LinkedIn and Glassdoor, you know, all these different online platforms to try to recruit into an organization, because the first thing people are going to do is go to Glassdoor and look, and are your reviews good? cool, well, now I'm interested. If not, no, I'll pass.
Right. And I mean, like any organization, we're not for everybody. It's a lot of long hours. You work really hard. You had experience at the test site. At our big test site in Box Canyon, those guys go out there and stay in a camp for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. But when you have that culture and you have that why and you have that driving force, it becomes part of who you are and what you are. And so there's people I've told, no, you're not going to be a good fit here. And there's people I've told you will be great and you will love it. But ultimately, in talking to our HR folks, our best hires are those that come as recommendations from our team. So you're spot on there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've covered a myriad of different topics on the show today. Is there anything specific that you would like to talk about or you would like to ask me?
So, Sean, we've known each other kind of in passing for several years, but not very, very well. And I've been listening to your podcast this week, so I feel like I know you a little bit better.
Appreciate that.
So when did you reference yourself as a keyboard warrior? When did you realize that you wanted to be more than just the keyboard warrior?
It was in my mid-30s because I was always intrinsically driven and focused on more. I wanted to climb that corporate ladder. I had something to prove. I had a chip on my shoulder. And my way to accomplish that was through my passion and love for technology and execution on that thing that I was really good at. At one time, I will go ahead and pat myself on the back. I was extremely proficient at designing data centers and networking and infrastructure. Very, very good at that. Being technically proficient does not always translate into being a good leader.
Yeah.
And whenever I started my leadership journey, I was working for a company called Forum. I had over 20 engineers working for me, and I was not a good leader. I found myself in a role managing all of the other engineers because maybe I was the best of the team or whatever reason, but I was not a strong leader. And so I actually thought maybe I'll go to a path of a solutions architect or something like that because I did want to make more money. Again, wanting to climb that ladder. I left there to go to a small IT consulting firm for about a year, ended up leading all their engineers. Was only there for about a year, and then left there to go work for Nine as their director of IT.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was still very focused on the technology, very focused on just making sure the environment was up, focused just on uptime and ensuring that the technology was resilient and the business could operate. In my mid-30s, I kind of got to a point to where I wasn't fulfilled. I wanted more. I didn't know what, but I wanted more. Now, an opportunity came up where in the first 4 years of my time there, we had 4 VPs of HR come and go. It was just a revolving door. And I thought, well, that would be challenging. And this is going to sound horrible. I hope none of them are listening. But all of my predecessors, from my seat, it appeared that we kept hiring HR managers and putting them in VP level roles. And they just weren't really equipped. And we didn't have, at the time, somebody focused in the organization on building leaders and developing leaders. And so, it just didn't work out. When my immediate predecessor left, I raised my hand, said I'd like the opportunity to lead HR. They're like, yeah, you're the IT guy. That doesn't really work. I kept pushing. Finally, I think their mindset was, well, it can't be any worse than what we had, so let's just go ahead and give it a try. So I did. And I quickly realized that I could no longer achieve the things I needed to achieve while staying in my office with the door locked. You can't lead a team of HR professionals or be in HR in general with your door locked and not get anybody access to you. So I had to learn how to start interfacing with people and building communication skills and things like that. And leading the HR team, I started learning about payroll processes and just all things related to HR. And in that process came to the realization that I really enjoyed it. Not only was it challenging, but I actually really enjoy doing this. And so my energy and focus started to gradually shift away from the technology and more into the people. And then once I started coaching others and seeing them accomplish the things that sometimes they couldn't even see in themselves, that lit a fire inside of me. And so that is the driver behind what I do today. And while I was at 9, leading all those different functional domains, and then leaving 9 and starting WSS, like that is my passion and purpose, is to build leaders, to build teams and cultures and things like that. I went down a little bit of rabbit hole, but I don't know if that answers your question.
That did answer my question. So you asked for it. You weren't put into that position.
I asked.
Okay.
Yes, I asked and was initially told no.
Okay.
It was such an interesting conversation with our CEO. She was phenomenal in terms of how she handled it. But the first meeting, we sat down. I said, I would like the opportunity to lead HR. And she was just listening. And I pitched my whole spiel to her. Mm-hmm. And she leaned in and she said, Sean, it's people like you that make this company so great. It's people like you that are going to continue to make this company great. That being said, we're going to hire an HR person that actually knows HR. I thought, oh, God.
I just laid myself out there.
I was like, yes, ma'am. Well, that logic checks out.
Vulnerability.
Yeah, that logic checks out. And then the next day, she sent me an email thanking me for my time. And the last sentence, it said, if you'd like to discuss this further, my door is always open. I thought, okay. All right. So a couple days go by. All right, me again. And I went in with even more intentionality and just kind of laid everything out there and said, look, this is what I'm seeing. And I admitted, to your point, you just said vulnerability. I said, I don't know payroll processes. I don't know benefits. I don't know employment law, but I know structure. And I know how to bring teams together. And I know how to improve processes. And I said, can you give me 6 months to a year to just lay a foundation, get the HR team to work as a cohesive unit together? Let me start looking at the processes. Let me understand them, and let's start improving the processes. And once we have that foundation in place, then after a year, I'll step back and we'll bring in an HR executive that can then launch off of that foundation. And I think that conversation with me showing that I was vulnerable and admitted that I didn't know what I was going to do, or how, I didn't know how to do certain things, but that I was going to do something with it. And the fact that I just admitted, look, I'll step back. If I'm not right, I'll definitely step back. So it kind of mitigated the risk from her perspective. It's like, all right, well, if he's not working out, he's willing to, just go back into IT. But that moment in being vulnerable, raising my hand and going after something, even though I didn't know if I was going to be good at it and I was scared and nervous, that changed my life. It absolutely changed my life.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that you had gone and asked for it. You brought up something there that, for me, leadership, it often gets overlooked in leadership, and that's the vulnerability piece. And that is being willing to admit what we don't know, because we can't all be great at everything. We have to surround ourselves with people who fill in those blanks and those holes for us, and then continue to strive and learn and fill those in as we grow as employees and as leaders. So another question for you that you touched on there, and that was the leadership development side of things. And this came up a lot in your podcast that I was listening to. And we, as an organization, it's kind of on-the-job learning of leadership skills. And I think I was very clear earlier in stating one of the reasons why I took time off to go get an MBA was to get external support in leadership. What do you recommend that companies do like us in order to help build out a leadership skill set in engineers?
Man, if I had a card, I would just slide it across the table to you right now. Okay, so this is a very challenging space, because I'm going to be completely transparent here. There really are no barriers to entry to becoming a coach. Whether that's a life coach, a leadership coach, an executive coach. There are certifications that you can get, but there's no laws, to my knowledge, that say you have to have X certification before you can coach people, right? Okay, so what that does is it creates an environment where anybody can raise their hand and say, okay, I'm going to be an executive coach. And if they've got a flashy website and they're convincing, maybe they're a great salesperson, organizations will, okay, well, James, he's our guy. I'm gonna go with him. Well, he gets in the door, and then very soon thereafter, you realize, oh okay, I'm not learning anything here. Did I make the right decision? I'm not sure if I made the right decision. Unfortunately, what that does is it puts a bad taste in a lot of organizations' mouths. So they've had a bad experience because, well, we went out and they had a great website and they had great reviews, but we got nothing out of it. And so their mindset is, well, there's really no value in that, right? That's why it's so important to actually bring, I'll say, coaches in or companies that do executive coaching in, have conversations with them, sit down, and maybe even have them give an hour or two presentation on leadership so that you get a sense, like, do they actually know what they're talking about? That's a quick way to kind of vet them out to determine, is this really going to be a good fit, or am I just being sold something by a great salesperson and a flashy website? Okay, so I do think there's a tremendous amount of value in doing in-person training. There's a lot of online curriculum, endless amounts of online curriculum, which there is value there. From a scale perspective, you said you have like, what, 200 employees roughly? I mean, you could probably buy an online curriculum, $50 a month per employee or whatever the number is, and say, okay, go do it. The problem is most people are not intrinsically driven enough to go out, sit through the courses, take the tests, retain it, and apply it. You're able to attain some level of knowledge, but the magic is really in the application of that knowledge. And that's why I think it's extremely valuable to be able to partner with somebody, whether it's in person or virtually, but have like one-on-one coaching or a small group cohort come together. Because what happens is, let's just say you and I were working together. You talk me through a challenge that you're experiencing. I can share my perspectives. Ultimately, I don't have the answers. You have the answers that are locked away in here. Yeah. And the best way that I have found is to start asking the right questions so that you come up with a solution on your own, because you're going to know your organization better than I ever could. Having a conversation with somebody that you can sit down and they can leave that trail of breadcrumbs, asking the right questions so that you come up with a solution, then it's really all you. You have ownership. Then we can talk through, what does it look like to apply that? What does the conversation look like? Okay, cool, we have a plan. Now you're going to go have that conversation, and you might blow the whole thing up. Like, it may be horrible. They might walk out of the office crying. That's not good. You report back to me. Okay, well, I did what you said, and they walked out of the room crying, right? Okay, well, so what happens
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Right, you ruined my life.
Yeah.
But what happens is it didn't ruin your life because you learned what not to do.
Right.
And so what happens is we take that feedback loop and then course correct and say, maybe don't go in and start off with, you idiot, why did you do this, right? Maybe you say something like, tell me a little bit more about this, right? So it's the subtle little nuances, and it's really the application of the knowledge that's so crucial, and being able to kind of go back and forth, finding a partner, whether it's us, whether it's any other firm out there that can come in, teach you one-on-one or do a group cohort. I think that is where the magic is at. Also, there are a lot of companies that, maybe they have a long-standing military career and then they just go start a leadership firm, right? Well, that's all well and good. You learn a lot of leadership principles in the military. However, people can't quit the military very easily. Not as easily as an employee can just go find another job.
Right.
So there is a little bit more of a hardened approach. One of my colleagues, which you've probably known or met before, but a massive amount of respect for him, but he has a very different leadership and coaching style because he's a retired Navy SEAL Master Chief. He has more of a sledgehammer across the face approach, which works well for oilfield guys or operators out in the field. That approach doesn't always work as well with a team of HR professionals,
right,
or accountants or the back office function. And this is why it's important for you to have those conversations and identify, okay, well, we have like office administrative staff that we really want to invest in developing. Maybe there's 30 of them. None of them ever go out to the field. It's a team that's, we'll say, I'm going to say soft. let's have somebody come in, and if the coach has that hardened sledgehammer across the face approach, it might not be a good fit. So I think really it just comes down to interviewing these different firms that do executive coaching and finding a good fit, really, because you guys know what you need more than me or anybody else ever could. And then the one last thing I'll throw in, because they are businesses and they're thinking about how do I scale, many of them tend to standardize their program and just cast a wide net. I'm going to teach you everything about leadership. Well, you might be a phenomenal communicator. You don't need to spend 3 days on effective communication. Whereas maybe delegation and time management might be an area that you need to focus more in on. And so it was, I wasn't assuming or anything, but that is something that I think is also important, is because a lot of leadership development firms are growing their business. In order to do that, in order to scale, you have to standardize. But you have to leave room for the nuances within each organization. So I just kind of vomited a whole lot up there. So hopefully that helps.
That was extremely helpful. And I'm going to put you on the spot by asking, you have developed a phenomenal network. You have a lot of people in different areas of different companies. Have you thought about putting together a group, a leadership development group where there's kind of, group sessions and then one-on-one coaching? I don't necessarily like the term masterclass, but it's more of like I have this great network. Why don't I bring these folks together and let them learn from each other?
So yes, that is actually in the works right now. And we're talking through a few different options around. I swear to God, I did not pay her to say any of this stuff. So for those of you listening, this is just a natural conversation that's unfolding. Okay. But yes, we're working through group coaching, and the approach to our group cohorts is really going to be, we'll say twofold. One will be, we go into an organization. They identify the top 8 to 12, we'll say hypo employees, and we'll put them through the program. Another option that we're actually evaluating is if we can get 12 people and say 3 people from 4 different companies, maybe in the same industry or maybe industries that are kind of tangential to one another, get them together in a group cohort, like in maybe say the Houston area or the DFW area, something like that. That actually adds even more value because you're bringing in that diversity of thought and experience and exposure. Correct. And I really like that approach. So kind of what we're thinking about right now is making it like a 9-month program, have 3 in-person sessions over that 9-month span of time. That would be like 3 days in each. And then having bi-weekly coaching calls with little small groups within that cohort where we cover all relevant content. But the value there, go back to that diversity of thought, is if we have somebody in maybe oil and gas, maybe some people from a wireline shop, and then also a company that does completion tools, for example, right? Those oil field services and completions companies, they work very closely with one another. So it actually helps them build their network in the process. And these wireline guys might learn a little bit more from the completion tools guys on how to better run their tools. I mean, they're probably great at running them already, but it is great to be able to build that network across multiple different companies. And so that is another thing that I'm actually probably more excited about, just because of the networking opportunities, than just going in and working with one organization. But yes, to answer your question, we are actually doing both this year.
Okay, that's interesting. Great. Sounds like you've got a lot of exciting things.
I do.
Yeah.
I want to go to the vulnerability piece again, because you had asked me a question on this, and you're right. It is paramount for leaders to be willing to be vulnerable. Early on in my leadership career, or as a leader, I was not great at being vulnerable. I was like a lockbox, and it didn't serve me well. Because you hear, okay, well, bosses can't be friends with their employees. Now, you have to be able to set boundaries, because what will inevitably happen is if I'm thinking of a friend of mine that I grew up with, we went to college together, and he was far and away the best engineer on my team. And because we knew each other for 15 years or so, people thought that I was showing favoritism towards him, when the reality was he was hands down the best engineer on the team, light years ahead of everybody else. And so whenever I would give him the big project work, I could know and trust. The problem was there was still that perception. Mm-hmm. So he and I basically created a little bit of distance just to kind of mitigate the risk of that favoritism. But ultimately, I think it is extremely important for leaders to be vulnerable, to check their ego, and to surround themselves with excellence. Right. There's a quote, and I can't even remember who said it, but build a team so strong you don't know who the leader is. And that's something that I live by to this day. The people on my team, even at WSS, like they are the rock stars in their domain. When it comes to the coaching side of it, they defer to me. When it comes to the consulting or the branding or the artwork or it doesn't matter. Like I defer to them on a lot. Now, ultimately, I have final say on everything, but I defer to them 9 times out of 10, if not more, because they are the expert. And what sense does it make for me to hire an expert and then tell them what to do? That's ridiculous.
Right. And it's funny that you say that because, we talked about the videos and the hazards demonstrations. That's my background. Now I'm living in this building worlds where we construct and deliver a turnkey building. That's not my world. So every day I'm learning from my team because they are experts. So every day is an exercise in humility for me because it's like, what is that term? What does that mean? Can you explain to me why we're doing it this way? And I absolutely love it, because it's continuous learning for me. So that was the first piece I wanted to add on to what you had there. The second piece that you said there was the quote. I'm going to add a quote, and again, I don't know where it came from, but it's, if you're not creating space for yourself by training those under you to take your job, then you cannot move on to have something bigger and better. So you will never achieve your life goals if you're afraid of giving your skills to those that you work with. And I've seen so many leaders that want to take their fiefdom and keep it because they're afraid of losing control of it. If you're afraid of losing control of what you got, you're never going to have more.
Yeah, it comes from a scarcity mindset, especially new leaders. And I've coached people that they step into a manager role, but they never truly lean into the actual leadership side of it. They keep doing the same thing that they were doing before, and maybe they're leading a team of 3 engineers instead of stepping out and actually leading them and empowering them and becoming a force multiplier for them. They just continue doing the engineering work. And so they end up crushing themselves in the process. And I can vividly recall certain conversations I've had. Well, if I just start managing them, then there's really no reason for me. If we have a downturn, they're just going to let me go. Like, what? Okay, hold on. Okay, that is very much a scarcity mindset. But if I'm being honest, I thought that way early on in my career. And it wasn't until I stepped in and started leading human resources on top of IT, and I thought, okay, so going back to my conversation with the CEO, I had to be vulnerable because part of the thing that I talked to her about was I don't have a lot of stuff going on, and I want to do more. Can you imagine telling that to the CEO of a company? Like, I'm twiddling my thumbs over here. Give me more. Like, that was probably the scariest part that I had to say. It's like straight up telling somebody, I'm
maybe
twiddling
you
my
don't
thumbs.
need me.
Yeah, exactly. But what happened is it gave me the opportunity to step in and start leading HR.
Yeah.
So I was able to lead both. Now, I would not have been able to do that had Jonathan not been on the team. And you know Jonathan.
Yeah.
And he's grown into one of the strongest IT leaders that I've ever come across. But I would not have had the capacity to step in and also start had I not been coaching and working with Jonathan and building him up. And then as we started building the HR team, as time went on, then they gave me safety and transportation and ESG and started the PMO, like on and on and on. And so I like to actually share my journey because it showcases how crucial it is to build people within your team and organization to replace you. That blows people's minds. You're like, hold on a second. Like, if I build up my team so that I'm not needed, then they're going to get, no, I promise you, as a business owner or a senior leader, if they see Karen comes in and she builds up Baker Risk and her teams where they can run completely on their own, and then, oh, there's this new thing, and you start up an entirely new business and you start making a lot of revenue for them, they're gonna want to do that more. So build the people on your team, create an environment where you can really just kind of step back and then go do something else. The business leaders are going to find something for you to do because you just proved that you can execute, you can grow, you can build people within your team and make the entire organization more proficient.
100%. And most of the time, organizations have way more ideas to implement than can get implemented. So if you free up your time to take one of those and run with it, they're never going to tell you no.
No?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation. What is the best way for people to reach you?
So you can go to our Fortress website. You can find me on LinkedIn. So Karen Vilas on LinkedIn. I think I might be the only one, so it should be easy to find. And I encourage all of you to follow both Fortress and Baker Risk because some of the videos that Sean has shown, we come out with those on a weekly basis. So a lot of great content. And all of you in oil and gas, they make great safety moments.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so y'all's feed, or my feed has been dominated with y'all blowing stuff up. Yes. So I absolutely love it. It's been fantastic.
Good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all we have for the show today. We'll have all of Karen and Baker Risk and Fortress contact info in the show notes below. So like, subscribe, go follow their pages on LinkedIn, check out their website, a lot of really cool stuff. Y'all have a good one.